All right, let's talk about this 2025 class a little bit before I let you go. It's early, but do you get any sense that UF kind of has a little bit more work to do this year, a little bit more of an uphill battle because of how the last couple seasons have gone?
I do, and I think if you are coming off of year one, or you're coming off of year two there, year one to year two, if you have bad season, that's a different conversation because you
Yeah.
can still tell the dream when you're early in there. We didn't win the games we wanted to win, but with a player like you could turn us around and take us back to prominence. Those are things that you could say when you're early in your coaching tenure there at a school. When you're coming off of two back-to-back seasons and you're saying that, like, people are like, man, like, are you going to be here before I graduate? Are you going to be here before I turn into an upperclassman? Like, those questions arise. So I do think in general, a lot of kids maybe playing a little bit more wait and see with Florida. We
Yeah.
like you guys a lot. If things were different, maybe my recruitment and where you guys are at right now could be a little bit different. Let's see where things go this season, because I just want to know if you're going to be here. Those questions I think are going to creep into any kid's head, whether it be something that they think about themselves, whether it's something that a family member or a coach or somebody involved is asking these kids, or whether it's another coaching staff that, is trying to, recruit against your school. And they're like, man, like, come commit to us. Like, I know those guys are going to be there. So I do think that those questions are there. So there is a little bit of an uphill climb. I think it's a lot of wait and see there with some of these kids, but Florida is going to get a lot of those kids on campus. They did this spring. The official visit season's coming up. So we'll see where things are after the summer. I always say, let's look and see where your class is at after the official visit rush, after these kids start making their commitments there, that summer period where they get things done before their senior year. That's where you should really have the core of your class put in. So I always say, let's wait and hit the panic button until we see what Florida's got heading into the season where things start to slow down a little bit, somewhat on the recruiting front.
All right. I want to ask you about a few kids specifically. Nathaniel, I'm going to butcher this, I'm sure. Owusu-Boateng. I can say the Boateng part. 4-star linebacker out of IMG. Is this somebody that, the Gators have a good shot with?
I think in a good standing early, but this is a kid that is not planning to commit until closer to the early signing period in December, if not on the early signing period in December. I mean, this is a guy where we have kids that are talking top threes, top fives, somewhere around there. I'm setting all my official visits in the summer, and I'm trying to commit for the season. This is a guy that just named a top 13, has, I think, 3 official visits in June, and is talking about taking more in the season. So that's going to be a slow-moving recruitment. He's done a good job, whether he doesn't really have any top schools right now, or he's done a good job of kind of playing everything neutral. He's kind of hard to figure out. I mean, he's very well spoken. He's very smart. He's very savvy. Like, he's very good with kind of keeping a straight face. He's got a good poker face. So I do think Florida's in there.
Yeah.
He's visited a lot. He's still getting to know. I do think there was a little bit of maybe a reset, if you will, from Jay Bateman switching over to Ron Roberts, because got to get to know a new person. He really liked Jay Bateman a lot. The two were really close. So I think that from him visiting, I believe, twice this year, spending some time with Ron Roberts, things have gone well. He's talking about setting an official visit there for in the season for Florida. He's got eyes on the LSU game. It's not something set, and that's obviously several months away. So that's almost an eternity in recruiting. But I do think Florida's in there. I think that they in a solid spot. Like, I don't think that's a spot where Florida's sitting near number 13 as opposed to, sitting in the back of the pack. So I do think they're in there. Relationships are good. Been there enough to see Florida. And I do like, if you're Florida, that you're getting the official visit a little bit later.
Yeah.
Whether that's, I mean, obviously Bradenton's not hard to get to Gainesville, but IMG plays such a strict national schedule. So those kids don't take as many visits as you would think most high school guys take, because he may play a team in Texas or what have you. So there's a lot of travel there. So I do think that Florida playing it a little slower with their visit, I think, is smart, because if you can get the guy on an unofficial visit, whether that be sometime this summer, whether he pops in there, or another unofficial in the season, I think it's good to sort of save that official visit in your back pocket.
All right, let's talk a little bit about a name familiar to Gator fans, Vernell Brown III. 4-star wide receiver. Now he's out of Orlando. Until recently, he was out of Gainesville. Obviously, his dad, Vernell Brown, Urban Meyer called him the face of the program at one point. I believe that was in 2005. his grandfather played for the Gators as well. You know, this should be somebody who Florida is really in the mix for, right?
It should be, and I do think they're in a good spot. I think right now, I would, if gun to head and you have to pick right now, if that's what you said, I do think Ohio State stands out above the crowd. I think he likes Florida State a good bit, but I think if there were four schools that are in it right now, Ohio State, Florida State, Miami, I think that Ohio State, like I said, I'd give them the slight edge. Brian Hartline, the wide receivers coach at Ohio State, is notorious for landing in-state wide receivers. He's done a good job of landing those guys that play for South Florida Express, which is a 7-on-7 team based out of South Florida. There's a lot of kids that have gone there from South Florida Express. So I do think that they're in a really good spot, but I think that he's also going to do his due diligence. He's another kid that's really smart, really calculated with all of his moves. I think he's going to go into the official visits that he takes this summer, really collecting all the data he can, whatever leftover data he may need to have, even if it's just how I feel spending an entire weekend somewhere, because all these schools that I mentioned, those four schools, he's been to them before. So it's more spending that extended period there. I do think that the in-state schools are doing their best to try to keep him home. But I think right now I would lean towards Ohio State. And people are like, oh, this is a legacy guy. Like, why doesn't Florida just already have this guy committed? And I think that from my conversations with Vernell, the legacy thing doesn't really matter to him. I think in general, like, he's someone that wants to, if he needs to forge his own path, he's someone that wants to. I mean, when Florida was recruiting him, he wanted them to recruit him like he wasn't a legacy. Like, I want you to recruit me because I'm a really good player. You guys think this and that of me and not so much of my family history there. So I do think that I would give the edge to Ohio State right now, but I do think that there could be some twists and turns as he continues to take visits down the line. So we'll see. But right now I would go Ohio State.
Let's stay on the offensive side of the ball. What about Antoine Hill, 4-star quarterback out of Georgia?
Florida is sitting at about 3 known targets on my end right now for the quarterback position. Ryan Montgomery, who just committed to Georgia recently, was Florida's, seems like, and as far as I know, their top target at 2025 for quarterback. So now you're left with Antoine Hill, Tramel Jones, who we talked about earlier, and then you've got Keelan Russell, who's a 4-star SMU commit out of Texas. Mm-hmm. So Antoine Hill is the only one of those names on Florida's quarterback board as of right now that is uncommitted. So, well, he was committed to Colorado. He's opened that back up. But again, only uncommitted guy. Official visit to Florida there that first weekend out of the gate on May 31st. Memphis is a team that's gotten some traction there. And I think that the way you've got a guy from down south, big frame kid, big strong arm, that's a kid that you look at Memphis, who's got, I believe, a fifth-year senior and upperclassman type quarterback. And then they've got a young guy who's impressed in their spring game. But there's a little bit of competition there that you could see an earlier track to playing time. And DJ Lagway, I think, looked good as advertised in the spring game at Florida. Just looks to be the future of Florida's program. I think that in general, Florida is probably going to have a little bit of a harder time than maybe you would if you didn't land the number 1 quarterback in the previous class, because that's seen as the guy that's seen this future. Hey, man, why don't you come over here to Florida? You can be the guy that's going to hold the clipboard and call the plays into DJ Lagway for the next X amount of years. And that's if DJ continues to progress on the path that he's on. So I do think that Florida and Memphis are 2 teams that I'm watching. Texas A&M is a team that he has mentioned in the past. They've since landed a quarterback commit. Seems like they're out of the quarterback sweepstakes. Duke is another team he's mentioned. They have a quarterback commit, but they're in a new coaching staff there with Manny Diaz taking over there. So would they entertain a second quarterback if they could, especially a guy that's got a big frame and a big arm like Antoine Hill, because the more arms, the merrier. So I think that Duke, Florida, and Memphis are those 2. There's 3 teams that I'm watching right now, but Memphis has a little bit of buzz there. So I'm interested to see how official visits go from here on out.
We'll get right back to talking with Blake, but first, it's giveaway time. I'm partnering with Meldon Law to give away 4 tickets to the UF baseball game against Kentucky. Entering to win is easy. Just comment Meldon Law below in the comments of this video. I'll also pin a tweet to the top comment, and you can enter to win on Twitter as well to increase your chances. Make sure you're following Meldon Law on social media, as they do giveaways for UF sports all year long. If you're hurt or in an accident in Gainesville, Ocala, Fort Lauderdale, or Lake City, Meldon Law should be your very first call. Again, comment Meldon Law to enter to win your tickets to the UF baseball game on May 11th. We appreciate Meldon Law for all their support. All right, let's move to the defensive side of the ball. What about four-star safety Hilton Stubbs? He's currently a USC commit, but he's from Jacksonville. So is there a chance of a flip there?
I think there's a chance, and I say that because was a guy that was high on Florida,
Yeah.
had them named as his leader. I think going back to January or something to that effect, was really high on them. It was a surprise when he committed to USC, and that's not just to me because here I am holding the big L of the wrong crystal ball there on 24/7 Sports, having one in log for Florida. But it was a little bit of a surprise to people around the college football world. And you check in after that, and a lot of people kind of raise an eyebrow, and you're like, that's Florida to USC. Like, that's a long ways to go. That's a lot of travel. We'll see how things go. That's kind of been the overwhelming feeling from just various people around different teams, different staffs, all those types of things, to where there's a little bit of skepticism of how solid can that be as time goes on. There's a lot of time going on there. So I think he's going to continue to take visits as far as official visits and maybe even more into the fall. He's already visited Florida and Miami since he's made that commitment to USC. Still open to them, still talking to them. And he actually was on the phone with Billy Napier a day or two after his commitment to USC, and Billy Napier let him know, hey, I'm still going to recruit you. I'm still going to treat you just like you've always been. You're still a priority to us. So I do think that Florida is going to be a factor for him. I'm not so sure. He had an official visit set for June, but he's got a 7-on-7 schedule in there in June. So I don't know that he's going to take one. I believe it's the June 7th weekend. I don't know if it's going to be a summer visit or if he maybe does it another weekend. That visit needs to be rescheduled, or if it's something the way they move into the fall, and we'll see from there. But I do think Florida is still very much a factor for him.
All right. Who else do you think that UF should keep their eye on near future? Somebody fans might want to get familiar with.
I think from targets, let's see. I think from talking to I'm going to scan through this list real quick of guys to follow real quick. As far as guys that I think that Florida has a really good shot with, one that comes to mind, I think, is Jeremiah McLeod. He's a 3-star defensive lineman there out of Gadsden County. Up there in the Havana north part of the state of Florida, a guy that Florida has hosted on campus 3-4 times so far this year, recently decommitted from Mississippi State. Florida seems to be in a good spot from there. I think he's going to take his time with the process going forward. And I think another guy that I think is going to be a sneaky recruitment for Florida fans to continue to follow is 4-star Auburn commit Malik Autry there out of Alabama. It's interesting because he's like a stone's throw away from Auburn's campus. He's been committed there for a long time, but I don't know that there was a recruit that spent more time in Gainesville this past spring than him. And all those trips were 2-3 day visits. It wasn't like he just popped in once in March and once in April. So he spent a lot of time there. So I think those are two names that come up to mind to me right now that Florida fans should keep an eye on. I think Zaire Addison is another one that I think if you would have asked me 2-3 weeks ago, somewhere like that, before he took a visit to Florida, it has Florida in the top 12. I thought that they were probably near 12 than they were close to 1. So took a visit to Florida. I think it was 2 visits in 3 days around the spring game. So I set up an official visit with Florida. Seems like they've finally gotten some footing in there for a guy that they treated like a priority. So I think that those are 3 guys that I think are at least worth keeping tabs on going forward.
All right, Gator fans, you heard it here first from Blake. Blake, tell everybody where they can find your work, where they can follow you on social media. You've got all this great recruiting information, and people need to know where to find it.
Yeah, Swamp 24/7. It's the Florida Gators 24/7 sports site. Myself, Jacob Rudner, Graham Hall, we're all on there. I guess I'm not very cool and don't have a life because I spend a lot of time on there. I spend a lot of time talking recruiting because it is a 24/7 year-round thing that happens all the time, especially with the transfer portal that's going on right now. Recruiting never sleeps, and those guys do a good job covering the team, whether it's baseball, basketball, football, all of the above. So that's where I am on the 24/7 Sports Network. And then my Twitter is, or X or whatever we call it these days now, is @Blake_Alderman.
All right, guys, everybody give Blake a follow. Thanks for hanging out tonight. This was awesome. And I feel like I got some names to pay attention to now.
Thanks a lot. I appreciate you having me on.